Hello class, welcome to your first video about constructing the skirt that we've been cutting out. This shape should look fairly familiar to you. Right here we have the waistband edge of the skirt piece that you cut out, and then far over there we have the hemline. Hopefully you can tell over here I've just sort of folded it back so you could see the whole thing on the table. Over here it's just hanging off the edge. The first step we're going to do on your skirt project is to stay stitch the waistband edge of the skirt. To do that, we're just going to use a machine straight stitch, and we're going to sew right along this edge all the way around it. It's a really simple stitch. We're not sewing anything to anything else. We are just doing this to stabilize this curve. Do you remember in our lecture about fabric and fibers, we had a thing called the straight of grain? And if you remember, you have a selvage edge and you have the other direction. So on this piece of fabric, your grains are running this way and this way. Our selvage edges were here and down here. So this is technically our straight of grain and this is our cross grain. I point all that out to say that this means anything that's not running this way or this way is bias. And what does the bias like to do? Stretch. So as you work with this piece of fabric, these curved parts that aren't running straight this way or this way, which is only right here and right here at either end, these whole areas will like to stretch and bend and warp out of shape and proportion. So the first thing we want to do is just run a stitch here to keep that from happening, so the rest of our project goes smoothly. So to do that, we'll use the machine. And as you sew around, just be aware not to tug or pull or try to over control. Let the machine feed it through, because we don't want to stretch these parts out on the bias. Let's take this over to the machine and see. Okay, we're at the machines and ready to sew this stay stitch on this waistband edge. So you remember this is the part that looks like the big smile. It's the smaller curve of the two big curves in our skirt. We want to sew from this edge all the way around this waist edge. Keep curving, keep curving, keep curving, and we're here. So to do that, you're going to start, well, first you'll notice I've got a lot of fabric piled up over here. That's because our skirts are heavy. So remember, you want to support that weight, either with your lap, which is not as foolproof as the table. So feel free to put some things up on this table before you start sewing, so your skirt doesn't try to bully you and pull itself away and let gravity win a fight. You want to line this edge up with the edge of the presser foot. You see how I did that? Right there. And you're going to keep that edge lined up as you sew around. You'll also know I'm using white fabric and black thread. That is so y'all can see a high contrast image. Sewing anything on those black fabrics is really hard to see on film, so don't be confused by my white fabric and black thread. Now to sew this stay stitch, I've got it at a 0 stitch width because I just want a straight stitch, and I've got it at about a 3, a little bit plus a 3 stitch length. That should be good. And we're just gonna let the machine pull our fabric through as we sew. Use your right hand to gently guide the fabric. Use your left hand flat to sort of drive the fabric a little without pulling or tugging. Remember, let the feed dogs pull the fabric into the machine, and give it a try. We don't need to backstitch on this stay stitch. It is not a construction stitch. It's just something that's going to keep our skirt from stretching and bending as we sew along this curve. Remember, this bias sort of diagonal edge will want to stretch, and we don't want to do that. So don't tug and pull on this as you put it through the machine. Let the machine drive, or let the machine do the work and you just drive a little. You steer. There we go. You don't have to do it all in one pass. You see how I'm stopping every few inches to readjust my hands. And I'll show you right now. We're just sewing along, and see there's our straight stitch there. And this whole time I'm keeping this cut edge lined up with the edge of my presser foot. This curve, remember not to pull or tug or stretch. You see occasionally with my left hand over here, I'm moving more fabric up onto the table as I sew farther and farther along the skirt. Sorry about bumping the camera. And that's the end of my stay stitch. I'll pull it out, I'll cut my threads, and you can see about a consistent little wider than 1/4 of an inch all the way along that curve. And what it keeps, it prevents our skirt from stretching out of shape. That's your stay stitch.